Yeah, the Marine is very, very strong. Reason number one, the Marine is not an armored unit, so the Void Ray doesn't have any kind of bonus damage versus the Marine. And number two, the Marine is very cheap in comparison to the Void Ray. So one Void Ray costs 400 resources. For the same price you get 8 Marines. And I mean 8 Marines is a combined HP of 400 and a combined DPS of something like 80. Whereas the Void Ray has only 250 HP and a DPS of 18 versus non-armored units. So the Marine is extremely strong versus the Void Ray. I'm going to take the Marine and put it into S tier. The Marauder is an easy one. It's an armored unit with no anti-air attack. So because the Marauder is armored, it takes really a lot of damage from the Void Ray. And the Marauder itself cannot attack the Void Ray. So this is an easy D tier. The Reaper is of course also a D tier unit because it doesn't have an anti-air attack. However, the Reaper is a light unit, so it doesn't take a lot of damage from the Void Ray, but it's still a ground unit with no anti-air attack. So I'm going to put the Reaper into D tier. Then we have the subscribe button, so it is there to remind you to please subscribe if you like these kinds of videos. But because the subscribe button is not a Void Ray counter, I'm just going to put it into D tier. Then we have the Ghost. The Ghost is an interesting one. So number one, the Ghost is generally a good unit versus Protoss because it has the EMP, and each EMP takes off 100 shields. And each Void Ray also has 100 shields, so one EMP is enough to take off the shields from a Void Ray, or even from a group of Void Rays. But however, when I prepared for this video, I did a test of Ghost versus Void Ray, and the Ghost actually sucks versus the Void Ray. So if you go like equal supply or equal cost, and even if you use the EMP against the Void Ray, the Ghost still lose versus the Void Ray. And it's not a super hard win for the Void Rays, but the Void Rays win versus the Ghost. And the reason is just because even after you take off the Void Ray shields, the Void Ray stats are still a little bit better. I mean, the Void Ray has 250 HP and then a DPS of 18 versus the Ghost, because the Ghost is not armored. But the Ghost only has a DPS of 9 or something with 100 HP. And of course the Ghost is also cheaper, but the Ghost is just not trading cost efficiently. The Ghost stats versus the Void Ray are too weak to be cost efficient, but it is not useless because you can always use the EMP, and at least the Ghost has an anti-air attack versus the Void Ray. So I'm just going to take the Ghost and put it into C tier. Then we have the Hellbat. This is of course a D tier unit. It doesn't have no anti-air attack. However, it's also not an armored unit, so it doesn't take a lot of damage. It doesn't take any bonus damage from the Void Ray, but it's still a D tier because it doesn't have an anti-air attack. The Hellion is just the same, doesn't have an anti-air attack, but because it's light, it doesn't take a lot of damage from the Void Ray. Then we have the Mine. The Mine is also an interesting one because number one, the Mine has a bonus damage to shields, so the Mine is generally useful versus Protoss because yeah, it just deals bonus damage to every Protoss units. Number two, the Mine has a splash damage attack, and this is also quite good versus the Void Ray because the Void Ray is a very clumpy unit. It tends to clump up. Also, the Mine is not an armored unit, so the Mine doesn't take bonus damage from the Void Ray. So you might think that the Mine is actually good versus the Void Ray, and I think it's not terrible, but one big drawback of the Mine is that the Mine has a range of 5, while the Void Ray has a range of 6. So if the Void Ray has access to detection, the Void Ray can attack the Mine without the Mine being able to attack back. And therefore I don't think that the Mine is particularly strong. I mean, if the Void Ray player is not watching or maybe doesn't have detection, then the Mine can be good. I mean, you need two Mine shots to one shot to kill a Void Ray. so it deals a lot of damage. But I think the main drawback is the range of 5, so the mine is mainly useful versus short range units like Link Bane or whatever. If you have a unit that outranges the mine becomes kind of useless because the mine is an immobile unit. But because of the bonus damage to shields and because of the splash damage, however, on the other hand, the mine is outranged by the Void Ray, I'm going to put it into B tier. B or C or something like that. Could also be a C tier unit. Then we have the Cyclone. And the Cyclone versus the Void Ray, I think it's not terrible, but it's also not really good. So number 1, the Cyclone is an armored unit, so it does take a lot of bonus damage from the Void Ray. However, the Cyclone has the lock-on ability, and the lock-on deals 400 damage, so in theory, one lock-on is enough to kill a Void Ray, because the Void Ray has 250 points. But then again, the Void Ray is a flying unit, and for flying units it's quite easy to break the lockdown. I mean, you can just fly over a cliff or over a lake or something, and then the Cyclone is not going to be able to follow you, the lock-on is going to break. So the Cyclone is usable. In theory you can kite, because by the way, the Cyclone is always faster than the Void Ray. So it doesn't matter if you have the Void Ray speed upgrade or not, the Cyclone is always a little bit faster. But because the Void Ray is a flying unit, it can always break the lockdown by flying over a cliff. The Cyclone is usable, but it's not particularly strong, so I just put it into B tier. Then we have the Tank. The Tank is an easy D tier because it is an armored unit, so it does take a lot of splash damage from the Void Ray. And the Tank, of course, doesn't have an anti-air attack. It's an easy D tier unit versus the Void Ray. Then we have the Thor. The Thor is also an interesting one because the Thor has 2 anti-air attacks. So you have one anti-air attack. This is the single target air attack with bonus to massive. It doesn't deal bonus damage to the Void Ray because the Void Ray is not massive. And the second attack is an anti-air splash attack that deals bonus damage to light. So it also doesn't deal bonus damage to the Void Ray because the Void Ray is not light. Okay, so both of the Thor attacks deal no bonus damage to the Void Ray, while the Thor as an armored unit does take a lot of bonus damage from the Void Ray. So the Thor is actually really not good versus the Void Ray. There's only one thing I'd like to add, is that the Thor gets better versus the Void Ray in big army numbers. Because if you have like a really big battle, so let's say 20 Thors versus 30 Void Rays or something, then you can use the anti-light splash damage air attack from the Thor, and in large army numbers the splash damage will get really effective because each Thor hit is able to hit 20 Void Rays at one time or something. So if you have like a really big army sizes, the Thor actually becomes quite good versus the Void Ray because of the splash damage. But this doesn't really happen in real game scenarios. In real game scenarios, you more often have like small numbers of Thors versus small numbers of Void Rays. And in small numbers, the Thor really sucks versus the Void Ray. But at least it has an anti-air attack, so I'm going to put it into C tier. Then we have the Viking. The Viking is also an interesting one, because number 1, the Viking is armored, so it takes bonus damage from the Void Ray. Number 2, the Viking has bonus damage versus armored, so the Viking also deals bonus damage to the Void Ray. So each of the 2 units deal bonus damage against each other. However, the bonus damage of the Void Ray is higher and better than the bonus damage of the Viking. So if you just A-move the Viking versus the Void Ray, the Viking loses, because the bonus damage of the Void Ray is just so high. However, the Viking has a lot of micro potential, because the Viking has a range of 9 whereas the Void Ray only has a range of 6. So if you have good micro, you can really kite the Void Ray. So every time the Void Ray approaches, you pull back a little bit, and then you use the range of 9 to get hits on the Void Ray, and the Void Ray is not going to able to attack the Viking back because the Void Ray only has a range of 6. So if you A move, it's not really good, but if you have good micro, you can really use the range advantage of the Viking to kill the Void Ray. So I'm just going to put the Viking into A tier. Then we have the Liberator. Liberator is also an interesting one because the Liberator has essentially the very similar anti-air attack like the Thor. So the Liberator has an anti-air attack that deals bonus damage to light and has a splash area. So the anti-air attack does not deal bonus damage to the Void Ray. Void Ray is not light. But again, if you have like really big army sizes, so imagine something like 30 Liberators versus 30 Void Rays or something, then the splash damage of the Liberator gets really powerful versus the Void Ray. So in big numbers, the Liberator can be good versus the Void Ray, but in smaller numbers, the Liberator just doesn't have any bonus damage, doesn't deal a lot of damage versus the Void Ray, while the Liberator itself is armored, so it receives a lot of bonus damage from the Void Ray. So the Liberator is essentially the same as the Thor. I'm going to put it into C tier. The Medivac, the Medivac is generally not a unit counter, it's just a support unit for the Marines, so it's not a counter to the Void Ray. I'm just going to put it into D tier. The Raven, the Raven, I don't think it's that good. I mean, number one, you can place the auto turrets. The auto turrets can shoot air, that's okay. But on the other hand, the auto turrets are armored, so they get destroyed by the Void Ray's anti-armor bonus very quickly. So that's not a very strong move. The anti-armor missile, you can use it of course on the Void Ray. But I mean, the anti-armor spell is like a very generic spell. You can use it versus everything. It's really not Void Ray specific. And the interference matrix, you can use it on the Void Ray to disable the Void Ray attack, but I think the interference matrix should be rather be used on like really high value targets, like Colossus or something. So yeah, it has some value versus the Void Ray, but it's really not strong. I just put it into C tier. The Banshee, of course, also is an easy D tier. I mean, the Banshee is a light unit, so it doesn't receive bonus damage from the Void Ray, but it doesn't have an anti-air attack, so it's useless versus the Void Ray. It's an easy D tier. The Battlecruiser also is an interesting one, because number one, the Battlecruiser is armored, so the Battlecruiser receives a lot of bonus damage from the Void Ray. The Void Ray is able to kill the Battlecruiser very quickly. And number two, the Battlecruiser has actually two attacks, one anti-air attack with a damage of 5 and one anti-ground attack with a damage of 8. So the Battlecruiser is generally much weaker versus air units, or it is just stronger versus ground units. So the Battlecruiser is really not good versus the Void Ray, because it, number one, it gets bonus damage, and number two, it doesn't deal a lot of damage to air units and therefore not to the Void Ray, so it's really not good, I think. But if you get Yamato Cannon, you can really improve the Battlecruiser, because the Yamato Cannon deals 240 damage and the Void Ray has 250 points. So I mean, if you get a bunch of these Battlecruisers with Yamato, you can almost one-shot the Void Rays, so you can deal 250 damage to the Void Ray, and the Void Ray survives with only 10 HP, and then you just need 2 Battlecruiser kills to hits to kill the Void Ray. So with Yamato, I think with Yamato, the Battlecruiser is actually usable versus the Void Ray, but without Yamato, the Battlecruiser really sucks versus the Void Ray. So I would say without Yamato, it's a C tier. With Yamato, it can be an A tier. So on average, I'll just put the Battlecruiser into B tier. Alright dudes, thanks for watching.